I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. I was okay. It was just a noise. I wasn't in danger. I was just in the kitchen. I looked down to see the blood now coating my hand. I had managed to slice my finger when I dropped the knife. I could hear the snickering from the other servants in the kitchen. They liked to make loud noises just to get a reaction from me. They liked to do anything that made me cringe and shut off for a moment. It was common knowledge in the pack house that I was not only wolfless, but I had killed my stepmother, the beloved Luna in the pack. At least that's what Kinsley, my half-sister and now the Luna, had told everyone after it happened. My dad, who had never loved me, threw me in the dungeons for years when Kinsley had told him I was the one responsible. I never was able to keep track of time down there, so I'm not sure how long it really was, but it was long enough to know that I had missed out on a lot of my life. I mean, even before that Kinsley told everyone that I had killed her mother, so I was bullied. Everyone knew that my mother had died shortly after giving birth, which I was once again blamed for, and that my father, the alpha of our pack, had no interest in me. I mean, I was his mistress's daughter. He already had an heir. He didn't need or want me, and it showed. Grace. A voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I looked up at Kathy. Kathy was in charge of all the servants in the house. My mother has supposedly entrusted me with her when she died, but there wasn't an ounce of affection in her eyes. I was just another servant, regardless of who my father was. I had had chores from the time that I could walk, but they always took me twice as long because Kinsley liked to mess up whatever I was doing. If I was cleaning the floors, she'd come in and get mud on them. If I was cooking, she'd change the temperature of the oven so my food wouldn't cook or would burn. The list would go on, always getting me in trouble. Always making me look incompetent. But I was not incompetent. I learned how to guard my work, so it wasn't messed with. I sat next to the stove, or pretended I didn't know she was there, so I could fix it immediately. I always knew when Kinsley was around. She was what everyone wanted to be. People envied her. Girls wanted to be her, and boys wanted to be with her. Her long black hair reached her hips, and her eyes were the same blue as mine, but on her they were stunning. Our eyes were the only thing about us that was similar though. She had beautiful olive skin and had filled out in all the right places. I was pale and basically a stick with pale blonde hair, but I guess that's what happens when you aren't fed properly for years. I learned quickly it was better to just keep quiet than to complain. Complaining only made things worse, my ribs could attest to that. I wore long sleeves to hide the bruises that often littered my body. Everyone knew what was happening to me. Ever since my father died, and Kinsley became Luna, she had made it an open invitation for me to get knocked around, scolded, or verbally abused. Her husband, if possible, was even more aggressive. I hated the pair of them. It might not technically be father's pack anymore since Adrian was an alpha in his own right, but this pack was being run into the ground. I might not have mattered to him, but I hated that all that power went to two truly evil people. You're bleeding all over the apples. Kathy barked when I got lost in my head again. I nodded and moved to the other side of the sink and began to wash the blood off my hands. I hated the sight of blood. When I was in dungeon after the Luna had been murdered, I had seen more than my fair share of it. It always coated my skin and matted my hair and pulled around me. It always threw me back there. I was only out of the dungeon, so that Kinsley could keep a closer eye on me. Before she had to torment me outside of the Luna's eye when we were younger. Then after the Luna died, she had to follow my dad's orders of me being locked away killing everyone he ever loved. But when he died, she had free reign. She wanted my punishments to be public. It wouldn't be real if it wasn't in front of people. I was a part of a show that I never auditioned for, but Kinsley and Adrian made sure I knew my place. And that was the lowest of the low on stage for everyone to see. I didn't bother wrapping my finger. I didn't heal as quickly as the other werewolves I knew, but it had already stopped bleeding, and that had to be good enough for me because I wasn't allowed to treat my injuries no matter how they occurred according to Kinsley's stupid rules. I went back to the apples I had been cutting for the pies we were supposed to be making. There was a whisper all around that someone big was coming to the pack from the north. Everyone knew a meal like we were cooking was above and beyond what they made on a normal day. I just hoped I wouldn't be expected to be their entertainment. I felt her before I heard her. It was like the air turned cold around us, but maybe it was just me. Grace! Kinsley shrieked. Kinsley marched over to where I was at the sink, causing everyone to look at her but me. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I forced my body not to show her that I was scared. I was 20 years old, but I still felt like I was a child. Why couldn't she just for one day leave me alone? I felt the sting of the whip as it shredded through my shirt with ease. I stood unmoving. Kinsley would not see me break. She had done enough damage to last a lifetime, but I would not let her see. I braced myself against the counter as the whip swished again. This was her favorite form of torture. My back was covered in old scars and new marks alike, and there wasn't an ounce of it that didn't have some sort of mark. I think she liked the whip so much because she could carry it around and pull it out whenever she saw me. Sometimes it was a quick 1, 2, and other times she prolonged it so she could have her fun. This was the worst of it though. This was Kinsley angry, and angry Kinsley was the worst. What the hell do you think you're doing? Kinsley shouted. You are supposed to be upstairs cleaning, not in the fucking kitchen. What the hell is wrong with you? I didn't say anything as I dropped to my knees as she continued to crack the whip. We have an important guest coming, and you are supposed to be out of sight. You pathetic excuse of a person. And not to mention you bled on the freaking apples. Kinsley was breathless as she spewed her words out like the venom they were. I hated her. I hated who she had made me become. I hated the shadow that I lived under because of her. But I kept myself upright with that hate making no noise. I couldn't breathe as I was fighting to remain conscious. The whip stopped, but I felt her grab my hair, forcing me to look up at her. You will go clean upstairs, and if I so much as see you before our guests leave, then it will be a night in the dungeons, and I will let the guards do what they want with you. She hissed in my ear, just loud enough for me to hear. Tears filled my eyes as the pain intensified. I attempted to nod it, but her grip was so firm in my hair that I could barely move. Will you behave? Kinsley sneered. I nodded again. Talking out loud only ever got me in trouble. Get out of my sight. Kinsley released me, and I struggled not to fall forward and smash my face into the counter's edge. I took a deep breath and worked to stabilize myself. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. My mantra repeated in my head as I stumbled to my feet. The lack of food now combined with the pain had my head spinning. You are getting blood all over my floor, Kinsley said in disgust. I nodded, grabbing the mop from the corner of the room, doing my best not to move too slowly and gingerly so she would not have an excuse to come at me again, not that she really needed one. I mopped up the mess I had made in the kitchen, and then went to a closet that held uniforms and cleaning supplies. I put on a new shirt and a dress over top of the two I was wearing. I had learned a long time ago that if I did this, the shirts would sort of act like a bandage. I used to be afraid that Kinsley would be angry about me ruining so many outfits, but she seemed to love that she could make me bleed through my layers. It was like a challenge or something to her. Once everything was in place and as secure as I could make it, I grabbed the cleaning supplies I needed and headed upstairs. The stairs were much worse than I imagined them to be, and I was panting by the time I reached the top, my eyes filling with tears that I couldn't fight anymore. I ducked into the first room on the right. It was a sitting area that was rarely used, but sometimes if we had guests it was available to them, so I figured I would start there. I let the large mahogany door shut behind me, and I immediately gave in to my need to make myself as small as possible. The pain was excruciating, and my head was spinning, and for just a moment I wanted to just let myself feel it, to let myself cry. I had only been crouched for a moment when I heard movement on the other side of the room. My panic immediately ensued, realizing I had walked in on someone utilizing this space, not the empty room I had assumed it to be. I heard a glass get set on the side table, but didn't move. Terror filled me more. Well, stand up, a voice I didn't recognize called out from across the room. And tell me who you are. My eyes widened as I looked up at him. He had chocolate brown hair and a light tan and sharp green eyes. He was young, maybe in his early to mid-20s. I struggled to bring my breathing back to normal. He was the most handsome man I had ever seen, and all I could think was that I wanted to run my fingers through his hair. I forced myself to stand and wiped away my tears. This man didn't know me. He didn't need to see my troubles. I would be in so much trouble if anyone found out I had crossed his path. I could only guess he was with the visitors I was told to stay away from. The door behind me opened. Alpha Adrian was smiling, looking at the man now standing before us both, but his face fell the second his eyes landed on me, shock and disgust filling his gaze. Alpha King Reese. Adrian attempted to mask his disgust. I must apologize. This foolish servant didn't realize we would be meeting here. I nodded meekly. This was the Alpha King. Nothing good could come from me stumbling through here. Adrian grabbed me roughly by the shoulders and started to move. She will be going now. She can speak for herself. The Alpha King's aura made us both freeze. What's your name, girl? I didn't move. Adrian was standing between me and the Alpha King, his hands still tight on my shoulders. I swallowed. Speaking only ever got me in trouble. There wasn't a chance I would say a word in front of Adrian. She's mute. Adrian growled, annoyed. He had to speak for me, even though it was his rule. He turned us back around to face the Alpha King. Even as powerful as Adrian was, he didn't think it was wise to have his back to the king. I watched the Alpha King sniff the air, and I tried not to cringe at the thought. She has no scent. The Alpha King frowned as he looked at me intensely, like I was somehow tricking him. She has no wolf. Adrian answered, his tone bored. There was nothing he hated more than talking about me. Completely worthless is what she is. The Alpha King's frown deepened in confusion as he studied me. I stood there silently trying to pull myself together. I refused to cry. I met his eyes as he searched for answers that I couldn't give. I told you to stay out of sight. The door slammed behind Kinsley as she entered and saw Adrian with his hands on my shoulders. I had known she was coming, but it didn't make this situation any easier. Adrian turned me toward Kinsley as she reared her arm back and slapped me across the face. My cheeks immediately heated with embarrassment, and this time I couldn't hold back the tears. I watched her arm rear back again so she could get more force, but before she could, the Alpha King interrupted. What are you doing? His voice held mild interest, but his face was blank, and I found myself dying to know what he was thinking. Putting this bitch in her place. Kingsley seethed, but her hand didn't continue forward. Do you treat all your servants like this? The Alpha King's voice was calm, but there was something underlying in his tone that I didn't know what to do with. His face was still passive, but there was a part of me that thought he might care. He wouldn't be asking the question if he didn't, right? Kinsley, being the drama queen she was, immediately burst into fake tears. I'm so sorry. I'm just a little on edge. Emily killed my mother and seeing her is just so hard. She is just simply paying for her crimes, but I shouldn't have lost my temper just now. I was just so worried she would try to hurt you as well. More tears filled my eyes, and I cried silently, but I didn't dare move. I never killed my stepmother. She was the only person who had ever been kind to me. Why would I have killed her? The thought made my heart hurt, but the accusations were nothing I hadn't heard before. Get out, Grace. You are making Kinsley upset. We will address this later. Adrian snarled. The Alpha King hummed. She killed your mother? She looks to be what, 16? 18? Didn't your mother die years ago? I stood frozen in my spot, not daring to look up or even breathe. Kinsley also seemed to be struck speechless. It was rare for her to ever be called out. She died 6 years ago. Kinsley finally answered after a long moment. Grace was 14. Old enough to know better. I see. I looked up from the spot on the ground I was staring at and found the Alpha King's eyes staring at me attentively. I couldn't make him see that I was set up. I would never win that battle. No one ever believed me. It was best to exit now before my punishment got worse. I nodded my head once and started to move toward the door. I'd actually like to take her back to the north with me, the Alpha King declared. The tone of his voice dared them to challenge him. This matter should have been addressed with me when it happened. I do not take kindly to those who do not follow protocols. I froze. What did he mean he wanted to take me back north? Did he want to punish me himself? Another round of unknown time in a dungeon? No. I can't go through that again. I felt my body start to shake from fear or pain, I wasn't sure which, but it didn't matter. What would you want with a murderer? Kinsley asked, but it was more of a demand, clearly not hearing the challenge in his voice. I'd like to think of it as more of a peace offering. You have no need to keep a murderer in your ranks, and I think I can find a use for her. We have plenty of roles that need filled. The Alpha King's voice was calm and he was speaking to them, but he never took his eyes off me. There was a fire in the look he was giving me. I don't like repeating myself, but this matter should have been brought to me when it happened. I wondered if he believed Kinsley's story because the thought of him believing it made me feel sick. I wondered how much worse going with the king would be than my current situation. Adrian was strong, but the Alpha King's body was clearly something he had worked on. His aura was also stronger than Adrian's, and it made it even harder to breathe. I reached for the wall, trying to steady myself. I didn't know which answer would be worse, but going with the Alpha King terrified me. Do we require a peace offering? Adrian hummed. I knew what he was thinking. He was reluctant to let go of his favorite punching bag, aka, me. We do, indeed. The king smirked, and I tried to steady my breathing. This could not be happening before we can even begin negotiations, but I'm sure we will reach an agreement. Then I guess we have a deal, Alpha Reese. I stood outside the pack house waiting for Grace. I didn't like that she was out of my sight already and I had only just met her. I rubbed a tired hand over my face. There was little that I ever felt helpless about. I was the Alpha King for a reason. I was known for being proactive and running a tight ship, but the fact that this girl had been living with those people under those circumstances made my heart hurt. How could I have not noticed what was happening in the last 6 years under my own reign? It had me questioning everything. My beta, Leon, reminded me that it was impossible to know everything. But something about the incident today had me questioning everything, especially within this pack. There was more going on here than what met the eye, and I intended to do some digging into exactly what was being hidden. The alliance was now nothing but a ploy to learn more. Of course, I had been traveling pack to pack for a while now. I always told everyone that I wanted to see what was happening within my reign, and that was true. But I had an ulterior motive too. I had yet to meet my fated mate, so I was casually searching for her as well. My kingdom needed a Luna. I had tried taking a Chusen mate several times, but it had never felt right. They always wanted the title, not me. I had learned a lot about my people on my travels, but nothing had been this blatantly wrong. A 14-year-old girl had killed her stepmother? My chest hurt at the thought. This girl looked like she could barely hold a spoon, let alone actually murder someone. There was something about her that was just captivating. I longed for my mate. I knew my reaction to this girl was mostly because I was lonely, but I would feed into it a little. This girl would give me something other than war to focus on, and I could let the anger in me simmer down knowing she was coming with me. I looked up as I heard yelling coming from within the house. I recognized Luna Kinsley's screech directed at Grace. The mute girl who would be coming home with me. God, what was I doing here? The front door opened, and my simmering anger reaches a boiling point as I see that Luna Kinsley has a tight grip on Grace's arm. Grace's blonde hair, which had been in a loose ponytail at the base of her neck when I had seen her 5 minutes ago, now was sticking out in every direction. Her pale face looked, if possible, paler, but her expression gave nothing away to how she was feeling. Alpha Adrian stood at the top of the stairs to the pack house, but did not approach me with Luna Kinsley and Grace. However, I noticed the way his eyes never left Grace. The way his gaze raked her body. I suppressed a growl and forced my expression to remain stoic. My wolf was going crazy in the back of my head. I was getting her the hell out of here. Alpha Reese, Luna Kinsley smiled, leading Grace over to me. I really don't mind keeping her here. I in no way want to inconvenience you. She batted her eyes at me in a way that I was sure was supposed to be flirtatious, but it just made me feel sick. No inconvenience at all, I assured her in my most. Is that all you have? I frowned, my attention now on Grace as my wolf paced uneasily in the back of my mind. She was only carrying a single bag that looked like it had to be 100 years old and had been through war. The handle was all but falling off, and bag itself was maybe the size of a larger purse that looked to be practically empty. Grace nodded. It was the first direct answer I had received from her, and my heart did a weird flutter at it. Okay then, I answered, reaching my hand out for her. Let's go. Grace nodded again, reaching for my hand. It was so small in mine, it made me feel sick. However, instead of looking up at me, she looked back at Luna Kinsley, who was still holding her other arm. Is there a problem, Luna? I asked coldly, finally showing my displeasure over the whole situation. Of course not, Luna Kinsley began to cry as she let go of Grace. It's just she's my only sister, and sure, she's made mistakes, but I am just so sad to be letting her go. Grace looked disgusted at the notion, but didn't say anything, and I tried to ignore the memory of her in tears 20 minutes ago. I'm sure the sentiments are shared. I lied, ushering Grace into the car. I climbed in behind her and slammed the door. I didn't want to be in this place a second longer. Grace crawled across the back seat and curled up in a ball. I started chatting with my beta Leon for a while, going over pack business. I turned back to Grace to ask a question, when I noticed her eyes were wide with terror, and shaking from head to toe. My heart pounded as I pulled her onto my lap and ran my fingers through her tangled brown hair. Her heartbeat immediately skyrocketed, and I wondered if I had made the right decision, but then it started to slow down again, and I felt better about my choice to hold her. She looked up at me, her dark eyes questioning what I was doing. I gave her a small smile that I hoped was reassuring. My own heartbeat began to race, and I felt myself pull her closer. My wolf didn't say anything as we just stared at the girl we had rescued. It was the first time he had ever willingly accepted me bringing home a girl. My gaze dropped to her lips, and I wondered what they would taste like. If she would taste as bland as she was portrayed, or if maybe she'd have a hidden sweetness. My gaze dropped again, and I scanned her torn-up servant's dress with a frown, snapping me out of my thoughts before I got impulsive. She may have been illegitimate daughter of an alpha, but she was still the daughter of an alpha. She should have been treated better than this. I wondered how she would look in normal clothes. The thought had me fighting back images of a girl who was not sitting on my lap terrified, but of a future girl, who would be so stunning it was hard to even imagine, but I could see it now. She could be my future. Leon, she will need new clothes. Leon's eyes met mine through the rearview mirror, and I could feel his hesitancy rolling off him in waves. Of course, sir, but what size is she? I frowned. How was I supposed to know? I didn't buy women's clothes. I placed my hands around her waist, trying to use my hands as guide. She shivered at my touch. She was nothing but skin and bones, and my heart clenched at the thought. I felt her tense in my arms and put my hands back casually around her and fought my wolf not to make an appearance at this sudden new revelation.